What's up, y'all? KM Best here. We're gonna run through the best Series 4 and 5 cards, and I think more importantly, talk about why they're good. A lot of people do these tier lists just to say, you know, this card is better than this card. That's not what we're gonna be doing here. We're doing it in a tier list format, but what I want you to take away from it is the information on how this card can impact your collection. Why I think Darkhawk is a more impactful purchase than Nebula, for example, is going to be more important to you than the fact that I think that it is. So hopefully you learn a lot from the discussion of these cards, not just the individual rankings. With that said, let's jump into the tier list. Thanks. What's up, y'all? Let's jump into the tier list. We're going to be talking about the best cards in Series 4 and Series 5 in Marvel Snap. It's actually pretty fraught to talk about this stuff at length because everyone's collection is going to be different and everyone's situation is going to be different. So what I want to do is just give you an idea of how each of these cards are used, how I, with a full collection, rank them, and hopefully, at the very least, my thoughts on these cards will be helpful to you in making the decisions that you need to make in order to optimize your collection progress in Marvel Snap. So we're going to start out with Daken. And Daken, however you pronounce it, is not a very, very good card. He's okay. He's someone that you'd purchase because he's on the season pass, but probably not ever going to be worth spending 3,000 or 6,000 tokens on. I'm going to put him in the C tier for now. There is a chance that, you know, these change as, you know, items are moved in and out of them. It is entirely possible that things change with that, but right now he is going in the C tier. He is mostly used in destroy lists, in Silver Surfer lists. That said, I do think that when X-23 comes out, when Silver Samurai comes out, there might be something real to do with this card. I'm definitely excited for that. Next up is Darkhawk, who is, I think, a pretty clear S tier card. Darkhawk is one of the most powerful cards in the game, extremely good in terms of value for points, and the baseline of decks that have remained competitive basically since his release alongside Zabu. Very, very powerful card. Not necessarily the kind of thing that you always have to pick up. There are metas where he's good and metas where he's bad and metas where people build to beat him, but he is, if he's not S tier, nothing is, basically. So Echo is next up. Echo is a legitimately powerful card, in my opinion, but she's powerful in a way that will rarely mean that you want to play her in the best deck, but she is a good problem-solving tool. Very narrow, though. So I think she's somewhere in B or C tier. I'm going to put her in B, but she's either at the end of it or like moving into C tier by the time we're done here. In fact, I think I'm just going to put her in C tier. She's all right, and there are specific situations where you really do want her, but she's rarely going to make or break a deck because of her fundamental unreliability compared to several other tech cards, right? So Galactus is, I think, hard to put in S tier, and kind of hard to put in A tier, but he's so unique, and his ability to attack the metagame from completely different angles than anything else makes it a bit of a hard decision for A or B here, I think, because I want to say he should be in B. He's not like a metagame staple, but I do think that just his uniqueness gives him some real value. I recently played him in a Galactus Thanos list that was pretty good. Like, he's just good right now. He's not great. I do think there are other higher priority things to get, but he's pretty solid. Ghost Spider is going in Echo Daken tier. Pretty powerful card in her very specific niche, and her very specific niche is not very highly represented right now. So if you're like a move diehard, go ahead, feel free to pick her up. But that's kind of what the C tier is for me here, where it's like, if you really love this archetype, go ahead. But if you're really just trying to play good cards, you generally want to stay away from that, right? So next up, High Evolutionary. I think High Evolutionary is still pretty clearly an S tier card. High Evolutionary mid-range decks are still solid. I actually haven't tried High Evolutionary Lockjaw recently, but I'm interested in revisiting it. This card is 7 cards in 1. It is absolutely an archetype unto itself. It's just good. I do think that in terms of being the tippy top best deck, High Evo's days of being that might be over, but it is still a very powerful pickup, and it is still a relatively standalone one. So that is a very good pick, I think, for budget players, would be High Evolutionary. You just need a couple supporting cards from Series 3, and you have a deck. Next up is Hitmonkey, whose downgrade, I think, really hurt him. I want to put Hitmonkey in B tier here, and I'll tell you why. Because I think that right now, the bounce decks that use him aren't very powerful, and the Sarah decks that use him aren't very powerful either. And the reason for this is twofold. Bounce decks are all about points. They're just putting points on the board. So when you have things that can go bigger than the bounce deck, that's a really big problem for them. So for example, the best way to play Kitty Pryde right now might be with like Shuri and Hulkbuster and stuff like that, as opposed to in a bounce deck. And the second thing with Sarah is a lot of decks are built to avoid Shang-Chi and Enchantress. Sarah's whole thing is being a Shang-Chi Enchantress deck. So right now, I would avoid Hitmonkey decks about as much as I would avoid, you know, they're not bad, but you can do something better probably in that same space. So next up is Howard the Duck, and D. He goes in the D tier, but I don't want you to just come away from this thinking Howard the Duck sucks. I think there are situations in which you would want to run Howard the Duck. So, for example, a deck that is playing both Iron Lad and Jubilee, looking for specific outcomes, might want to run Howard the Duck as a way of like thinning the deck effectively. Playing with a 9-card deck is pretty important if you can get it to happen. That said, it's such a niche case, it requires such expenditure that I don't think it'll necessarily be worth it, but it's worth saying, like, when I talk about these cards, I don't just want to be like, this sucks, it's terrible, awful, you don't get it. Like, yeah, I want to also explain how it could end up being good, though. So that is where Howard is going right now. Iron Lad is going in the A tier. Previously, I would have put Iron Lad higher previously, but I have found that he's something less than required in basically every deck that he's in except Patriot. Like, if you're playing him in Thanos, you end up costing yourself Chavez, so you have to choose between Chavez and Iron Lad. So, you know, he's good, but like there is like a very free-to-play replacement, right? And if you're playing him in Darkhawk, like, yeah, okay, you can either play 6 4-drops, or you can drop one of the tech cards, or you can play Captain Marvel, right? Like, there's, like, obviously he's good there, but I don't think he's as required to play those lists as he was, say, a month ago or so. I think he's a little more surplus to requirements there. Obviously, if you want to play Patriot, you probably still want to be playing him. There's other specifically very cool stuff that he can do, but mostly I think he is a little bit at an ebb in terms of his power level, and it's a testament to how strong he is that an ebb is just A tier, right? All right, Jean Grey is going to go in C tier, I think, for now. I do think it's very plausible that Jean Grey ends up being a strong card at some point. I don't have any way of making her that right now, but she's a bit like Echo, where her effect is so specific that there is going to be a situation where it's going to be useful. And I think she's a little bit stronger there. So I'm gonna say, if we're doing ordering here, I think Echo is above Jean, but Daken is above Jean. Ghost Spider's probably not. I think it's something like that. Jeff is next. Jeff is the best card in the game. If you spent 10,000 tokens on Jeff, it would be worth it. Jeff goes in basically every deck and is the sort of patient zero of this metagame. It's just as good as it gets. It is A+, goated, incredible. And there's really not a lot to say about that. It is the best 2-drop in the game. Every deck runs 2-drops. Every deck runs Jeff, right? It's honestly that simple for Jeff. Kang, What do we think? Because, like, I can see an argument for Kang going in C tier or D tier here. I think he probably goes in D tier. But I will say I have been a little interested in Kang recently, but not interested enough to necessarily move him up. I just want to say, like, there are situations where it's like, oh, I actually could use a Kang here. I think the better people have gotten at Marvel Snap, the more useful he has become. But I also think that fundamentally, unless you're drawing him on turn 5 or turn 6, he is negative cards, so you spend a card for nothing. There's a pattern with Kang and Howard here where you're spending a card for knowledge, and the value of that knowledge is limited if you're a good enough player, if you're playing battle mode, or if you have a familiarity with the meta so you know what your opponent is doing. Like, the more you understand what your opponent is doing anyway, the less you actually need this card. So that is sort of where I'm at with him. He is solid in that he is the only card that will do that thing. But that thing is, for 99% of decks, not worth doing right now. Kitty Pryde is going in A tier. She is used in decks that want to put a Hulkbuster on her and a Forge on her and then go like Taskmaster with her after a Shuri. Those decks are pretty sweet. Decks that go over the top like that while not having priority so they're not vulnerable to Shang just is a pretty sweet thing to be. She's used in Sarah decks. She's used in a bunch of decks. Like I've seen her in the like Mirage collector versions of Devil Dinosaur. She goes in a ton of stuff. And so I do think that Kitty Pryde still remains in A tier. I miss what she used to be, but she's still a pretty solid card. Obviously, a very key card in the move mid-range deck that uses her to like trigger Silk a bunch, trigger Angela. Honestly, you could talk me into putting her in S tier. I think for now, I'm going to have her at the very front of A tier because there are other versions of that move deck that are like also good. And you don't necessarily need to buy her to play that move deck. But I do think she is just an extremely powerful card. I love her to death. No issues here. Next up is Knull, who I can't tell where he should be. We're running into the issues with tier list here, where I think Knull ends up at the very front of C tier. But he might actually see more play than the cards in B tier, because he goes in multiple different decks. There are the Destroy decks that will play him as a big payoff guy. There are the Mr. Negative Arnim Zola decks that will play him to do degenerate combos with. And of course, you know, traditional Galactus decks will still play him. I do think there's a pretty coherent argument for moving him up to C if that's something that you would like to do. If you want to play any of those decks, he is definitely a card that really helps that happen. I think he's pretty damn good. And I just think my issue with him is I don't think those decks are very good right now. But he is the kind of card that would be a riser, if that makes any sense. He is either, yeah, it's either top C or bottom B. I'm going to put him in bottom B for now. Lady Deathstrike for me is going in C tier. I found success with her in a Thanos Galactus just absolute pile where she was our sort of secondary thing to discount our death. We used Forge with her. We used Forge with her, Orc Forge with Galactus, a bunch of different options. And honestly, I think she might be a little bit better than this because fundamentally destroying things on your opponent's side of the board is so strong. It's just that right now, basically everywhere that I've tried her that isn't that list is just not real. Like, and so I can't tell you if that list for sure is the truth or not. I can just tell you that it's been very good for me. And we'll have to see how it like holds up to stress tests in the future. But right now, I mean, I think she's pretty good. But all evidence seems to point to basically every shell other than that not being great. And I'm not sure if you took her out, how much you'd even notice. Next up is Legion, absolute S tier card. Legion is currently used in decks like Darkhawk, in decks like Move Midrange. That said, he's not exactly required for them. He's just the best option, right? So if you don't have Legion in those decks, you can play Vision or whatever, right? Like it's not the gap between him and the cards you can replace him with for free is not enormous, but it is noticeable. And he's also a card that scales with your understanding of the game and your understanding of your opponent's plays. He's an extremely unique and powerful effect that at minimum is Big Scarlet Witch, and at maximum is one of the strongest cards in the game, absolutely game-winning, right? So Legion is really good, but I would put him at the bottom of S tier because you don't necessarily, you need High Evo to play an Evo deck. You need Darkhawk to play a Darkhawk deck. You don't need Legion to do that. There's no deck out there that is like, if you don't have Legion, you can't play this. That's not really a thing outside of the Storm Legion combo, right? That's not a thing that you see a lot. So he's a flex piece similar to Jeff, except Jeff goes in literal everything. Legion does not go in literal everything. So he's very good, but not necessarily like you need to buy this to play the deck. Master Mold. Oh god. Oh god. I'm gonna be 100% straight up here. I've put him in like C tier for several tier lists running. And I think at this point it's time for me to just admit it and just put him in D tier. I think I just gotta call it and be like, look, I like him, but no. Like this, it doesn't work. I tried. I played Master Mold Absorbing Man. Like it's just not there, and it probably never will be. And that's probably a good thing because it's really annoying to play against. But that is where Master Mold is at right now. Mirage is actually like a good card. It's just you're never gonna buy her. So Mirage is, I want to say, like legit good. Just there aren't like so many twos that you can play. I don't know. I like her a lot more than something like Master Mold. I like her significantly less than Galactus, Hitmonkey, and Knull. So I think that means that she goes at the top of C tier, but I'm not exactly sure. I think she's like a card that you can get that isn't going to necessarily impact your win rate too much, but it's cool. I like her a lot. She's cool. I think she's going top of C tier here. Modoc is actually legitimately hard to rank here. You might be a little angry with me for this one. I'm putting Modoc in A tier. I don't think Discard is the best deck, but it's a deck. And I think that you cannot play that deck without Modoc at all. You cannot play Discard without Discard. It probably goes here. He is the card that makes that deck work, and it is kind of okay. You know what I mean? It is a solid deck. I will keep him in A tier for now. Next up is Nebula, who has really fallen off recently. I think she ends up going in top of B tier. Nebula is really good and hard to replace in the decks that run her, but the decks that run her have gotten less and less common. The Spider-Man nerf got rid of High Evo Lockdown. Electro isn't around very much anymore, but like if those are the decks that you want to be playing, Nebula is a very worthwhile pickup for that. So Nebula is going to go top of B tier, I think. Yeah, Kitty being popular means that she sucks. Killmonger being popular means that she sucks. And it's just sort of an awkward time for her, but she's still a powerful card. Negasonic Teenage Warhead is going in D tier. Apologies to Owl God. This card is not very strong. It is not what you want to be doing, and I am not very interested in playing it. Next up is Nimrod. Nimrod is honestly as strong as he's ever been. Right now, Nimrod is at his absolute zenith, and that is probably bottom of A tier. His decks aren't that good, but specifically playing Shuri into Nimrod is unreal powerful. Unreal powerful. That specific combination of cards is what is keeping him here. He is the best part of the decks that he's in when they do that thing. because that is a bunch of power that cannot be Shang-Chi'd. That is just, it is something that you have to be scared of. You will lose to. I would not necessarily play, but it is very powerful. Silk is going in A tier. I want to say, maybe bottom of S tier above Legion at this point. Because I think those move decks are probably the best decks in the game. And I think that Silk is an absolute requirement for that. I think it has to be here for her. I do think that deck is better than Evo. That deck is better than Darkhawk. But those two have a longer pedigree, right? So, like, the reason I have Darkhawk and Evo here is because we have, like, a little bit of understanding that, like, they're okay with these archetypes existing in some form. And those cards are, they have a little more of a pedigree, right? So, other than that, like, right now, you could put her here. Like, in terms of affecting your win rate, that is, I think, probably the best deck in the game. And she is absolutely required for it. So, S tier, and it's very, very, very clear, I think. Next up is Snowguard, who is the worst card in the game. Do not play this. Spider-Ham is going in A tier, above the two conditional cards here. Spider-Ham is going right here. Spider-Ham is extremely strong and a very, very powerful disruption piece that you will absolutely need in order to combat some of the decks in the metagame. He has fallen off a bit, but he's still one of the best 2-cost cards in the game, and extremely, extremely worth picking up, especially if you can free roll him. Spider-Man 2099 is probably bottom of C tier. He is... I honestly think he's underrated. I think blowing stuff up is good. But there's too much Thanos running around to make me ever really want to just play a card that blows one thing up. I just don't want to do it. Stature. Powerful with Black Bolt, for sure. A very, very reasonable card. I think Stature gets pushed down the list a lot by Legion, because the decks that were playing Black Bolt and Stature are now playing Legion. I think she's still going to be around, though. I would happily put her in the B tier, and her ability is just very, very powerful, especially when and if Silver Samurai comes out and ends up strong. I think she's a solid B, but you could talk me into an A. It's just that if you have the 3,000 tokens, you always pick up the Legion instead, I think. I think you're always picking up the Legion instead. Next up is Stegron. Stegron is going in the C tier. I think he's got to go probably above these ones. He's okay. You just don't ever want to play him. There's usually better options at every part of your curve. He's fine. That's pretty much it. He's fine. You probably should never buy him because you don't buy fine. Thanos is right here. You could argue he's better than Jeff. He is his own archetype. He is one of the most powerful cards in the game. He is probably my favorite card in the game. There's just so many things that you could say about Thanos, and I think I've said them all in various videos I've made on Thanos decks. I think Thanos is probably the strongest card in the game. It's just he's only one archetype, and Jeff goes into all of them. It's really just a coin flip for you. Living Tribunal is going to go at the bottom of B tier. I'm not saying this card is actually good. I just think it is a way to approach the game. Like, I want to be clear about this. Don't buy Living Tribunal, but it is legitimately kind of powerful. Don't buy it, but be aware of it. It is a strong linear deck that will almost certainly never dominate a meta, but can beat you. So Living Tribunal probably actually going to end up top of C tier instead. Phoenix Force is not good. bottom of C tier, maybe into D tier. Just not a good card, not a strong card, not doing anything you want to actually do. It's okay. I enjoy the combos with it. I've tried a bunch of stuff, but it never seems to really get off the ground. It's a little too clunky or too underpowered. I like it. It does stuff, but the best part of Phoenix Force decks is usually the Nimrod that they play, and that's not a good sign. Finally, Zabu is, I think, unquestioned S tier. You need Zabu to play the Darkhawk deck, you need Darkhawk to play the Zabu deck. So, yeah. Zabu is, I think, an unquestioned S tier card, and this is a tier list I'm actually pretty happy with. I am happy with this tier list. I think this is a relatively helpful way to understand the meta right now, and I am hopeful that talking about every one of these cards helped you understand how each one of them can impact your collection, because obviously it's a very, very different situation for every player out there because of the way collections are personalized. So hopefully, more than just the tier list, you were able to take something away about how these cards will impact you, and I hope that it helps you. Thank you so much. I've been KM Best. You have a good one.